I want to introduce you to the Copernicus Data Space Ecosystem in general before we start diving into code. So actually, since a couple of years, there's some activity in the remote sensing community, some demand for something like an independent mid-layer connecting data providers and data users. This quote from Aravind is not from us. I mean, he's completely independent from Synergize. But this demand to be able to share and access data independently from the commercial market, and especially, of course, for Sentinel data, which has one of the largest data volumes for an Earth observation project. So in a way, this is what Copernicus Data Space Ecosystem is about. It's essentially the data infrastructure for the Sentinel program. So Copernicus has moved from simply making data available to making data and processing capacity and code available for you to be able to do your work inside this infrastructure. So you might think that the data infrastructure, a good data infrastructure is one that moves a lot of data. Now, I think this is actually the other way around. A good data infrastructure is an infrastructure that avoids moving a lot of data because you don't have to move the data because you only have to move the results. You can calculate everything inside and then access the results in the end. So this was designed for a platform to base operational services on. We also want to boost the remote sensing industry with this ecosystem. And one of the most important properties of this ecosystem is that it's going to be here for a long time. So it's part of the Copernicus program. It's governed by a service level agreement. It's going to be around. At the moment, we have it definitely agreed for 6 years, but we're working on it to have it confirmed for several decades. This is not going to change. This is not going to go away. You can really trust it. You can really invest in it. And talking about investment, I mean, the old way to work with Earth observation data, when I was a student, they told me working with EO data is investment heavy. You've got to spend a lot of money if you want to work with EO data, because the data is on a rolling archive server. It's offered in granules. You download it. You store it somehow on your side. And then you need quite a lot of processing capacity. This is heavy on data volume. You have to set up a coding environment and keep it up to date. And this is expensive, but now, I mean, with the data volumes we now have, it's also completely impractical. You just can't keep up to date with the volume of data that the Sentinel program is offering. So what I learned again in school was that the rule of thumb for investment in an EO project is you spend 1 unit of money on the hardware, but it's got to be really powerful hardware, right? And then you spend 10 units on software and 100 units on data and 1,000 units in skilled personnel. So this way was really, really investment heavy. And now, what we want to change with this ecosystem is exactly this property. We want to do the investment for you. We want to take away this really, really steep entry curve with the system of data availability that we are sharing. So inside the data space ecosystem, there's a system of APIs that allows you to do the querying, the filtering, and even the raster and vector processing of the data before you download it. You can view the data online, or you can even share it online without having to put it on your own data system. You can process on virtual machines that already have the data instead of taking the data down and putting it back up again somewhere else. And of course, you can still download the images if you need them. So this investment thing, I really hope is going away. So what the data space ecosystem is about is essentially access to all Copernicus Sentinel data. And I have to say this again because, again, in the old system, it was a rolling archive. So the new data was up there for immediate download. But if you wanted archive data from 5 years ago, you would have to request for it, and then you would have to wait for it to be packaged and download it later. Now this is over. You can have all the data instantly. It's immediately there. There's also a set of additional data sets, Copernicus contributing missions, federated data sets, things like elevation models, cloudless mosaics, also available for immediate use in the ecosystem. And on top of this, we have this scheme of APIs that allow open data distribution service inside your code. And this is actually what we want to introduce you to in this workshop. There's also a Copernicus browser. If you're familiar with the Sentinel Hub EO browser, which was quite a popular platform for viewing and interpreting satellite imagery, most of the functionality is now available in the Copernicus browser for free for everyone. So this is a visualization tool in the browser. It's available for anyone to look at satellite imagery. And then on top of this, we have code resources. We have Python libraries. We have the Jupyter lab. We have OpenEO. So many different ways to make it easy for people to start EO coding with the resources that are available. And finally, We have cloud computing capacity inside the ecosystem. When you scale up to a level that free processing is not available anymore because it's a big thing, then you can access virtual machines in a commercial setting inside the ecosystem that have the same data collections and that have the same code base. And all this builds an open ecosystem where we hope that service providers will join, and they will also share their upstream or downstream data inside the ecosystem. So just to go through the individual components, as I said, this is really all Sentinel data, both level 1 data and level 2 data for Sentinel-2, auxiliary data, but also these Copernicus core data sets, so elevation models, contributing mission data sets. These are available inside the ecosystem for you. This includes Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, Sentinel-3, and I have to point out this is Sentinel-3 land. So all the ocean data for Sentinel-3 are served through a completely different infrastructure. That's the Copernicus Ocean Virtual Lab. But Sentinel-3 over land is served directly inside this ecosystem. And then there's this set of additional data sets, world cover cloudless mosaics, Copernicus contributing missions data for the conditions that these providers offer, elevation models, Copernicus services. These are all packaged as data collections inside the ecosystem. So just a quick example of what you can do with this. Crop monitoring, agriculture monitoring is one of the big applications of EO data in the EU. And most countries operate some sort of an EO-based system to evaluate their land parcels. And now, if there's a dispute over something that happened in the past, in this case, we're talking about whether a specific parcel was mown in 2021, so 2 years ago. But if you have a setup for managing or evaluating mowing of a parcel, then you can just request the data from 2021 and run the same algorithm, and the case is settled because the data is already there and available. So moving on to the APIs, and let me explain quickly what APIs are for those of you who are not really familiar. APIs are about streamlined access. So an application programming interface is a block of code that allows one piece of software to talk to another piece of software, accessing data as if it was just a variable that you defined inside your software. And there's a whole portfolio of APIs available for various functions, including data access. So the APIs that you would use for accessing data in the Copernicus Open Access Hub, like Stack or Open Data or OpenSearch, are still available. They're there for the sake of backwards compatibility. They're also rather popular APIs. Many people use them. These are still functioning. The only thing you need is to change the endpoint from the Open Access Hub to Copernicus Data Space Ecosystem. The Open Access Hub is closed. I really hope that none of you here are still expecting data from the Open Access Hub anymore. And then, in addition to OData and Stack and OpenSearch, there's the Sentinel Hub catalog API that allows you to request a list of data sets available for a specific bounding box and a specific time frame with various parameters. So you can filter the collection, and you can pull down a list of data that you can pass on to your own code to access the data sets. There's data visualization APIs, so OGC APIs. These return a map that is compatible with the OGC standard. So this means that if you request data from the ecosystem with the OGC API, it's going to be compatible with ArcGIS or QGIS. It's a map service. We even have a dedicated QGIS plugin that you can use. You can install it to your own QGIS, and you can access the Sentinel data directly from the ecosystem with that plugin using the OGC APIs. We have the process API. I think this is the most powerful one. So the output of this API is an image. This allows you to process the image before you download it. You can apply filtering by quality or date or area of interest, but you can also apply a spectral index, even a small decision tree inside the API as you do the data request, as you do the data download. We're going to show you this really soon in the notebooks. And then there's the statistical API. Statistical API is about zonal statistics. So if you have a vector outline, you can query the statistics of the pixels inside. You can create a histogram. You can count percentiles. You can make a time series. So this is going to return you the statistics without actually pulling down the pixels. So again, reducing the data volume quite massively. And then there's also the bring your own data API. So if you have a raster data set that you can convert to a cloud-optimized GeoTIFF, you can upload it to cloud storage inside the ecosystem, and then you can apply the same processing steps on that data set to use it with your own tools. And then there's also the OpenEO API family. We're not showing that too much. That's done by a different group. But it works with a a data format agnostic data cube format, and it's also independent from coding languages. So the idea is to smooth interoperability for data really efficiently. It gives you scalable processing in a web graphical interface like Model Builder, and then it even gives you the code in the end that you can use for processing the data. So again, just a small case study. We're looking at the 2022 drought. The question is how it affected Bavaria. Bavaria is really big, and it's a lot of data points, but what you can do is you can upload the area of interest as a JSON, and then for this area of interest, using the statistical API, you can query all the NDVI data in 2022 and 2023, and you can create a time series. It's going to pop up in a second again. Here's the time series, and you can compare what happened between these 2 years. Actually, there was not that much difference in terms of mean NDVI. Okay, we're going to flick through the browser really quickly because I think many of you might be already familiar with this. So this is a tool for visualization and individual download of user-level products. So it allows you to search, to open the data. It allows you to download the data in various forms. Just a quick look for maybe sharing on social media, but also the original data or even high-resolution print quality images. You can create statistical histograms, and you can even look at the data in 3D. So just a short use case again. Somebody wants to look at volcanoes in the Canaries just to see what the effect of the volcano was. Well, you can browse to the area of interest. You can search for the images that are available. Then you get a list of images. You can create a time series just to look at a larger area, a mosaic. And then once you have this list of images, you can actually create a time lapse. So you can look at a couple of images in a GIF. You can download this GIF, or you can view it in your browser. And then you see this is after the effect of the eruption. This black spot is already at the area affected by the volcano. But if you apply a completely different spectral index, it's really going to highlight the heat of the lava coming out. You can again look at this in 3D. You can look at it before and after using the RGB images. You can look at the NDVI, so how it affected the vegetation. And then you can even define a spectral index that's going to allow you to evaluate the affected area. So the browser is a really efficient tool at your fingertips. You can even use it on a smartphone just while traveling on the bus, looking at pretty satellite images. I do that quite a lot. And then we move to the onboard code lab. So we want to provide code libraries that access the data as collections or as variables in a really, really easy way. The simplest way to start EO coding is with the requests builder. This is a graphical interface where you can select the API. You can query the area of interest. You can look at the time frame. And then you can apply a spectral index. You can apply an eval script, which you can also browse from our custom script repository. And in the end, it's going to give you the actual code. So in this box, you get the request that you can also build into your own Python code, or you can just apply it, and then you get the result for download. It works with the Sentinel Hub API system. And then we have the Jupyter notebooks. This is what we want to introduce to you in detail. This is a completely online infrastructure, so it allows you to work with EO code and to look into data without actually installing or downloading anything, completely online. There's quite a few use cases already on board, in very basic things, but also complete end-to-end processing chains. We're going to see this. This is OpenEO once more, so this code-agnostic data cube thing. This also has an algorithm plaza, so a way to prototype and share code, reuse it for different applications online through a sort of a marketplace. Just a very quick example, monitoring river freezing using SAR data, using Sentinel-1 radar. You can query the data for an area of interest. You can look at the data in the Jupyter notebooks with small visualizations. You can select a threshold to separate ice and water, and then you can apply a time series just to look at how the freezing and the thawing went in the area of interest. Okay? Commercial cloud computing capacity, if you've outgrown the Jupyter lab, if you've outgrown your free quota and you want to move to an industrial application, CryoDS is the commercial element of the Copernicus Data Space Ecosystem. So this allows access to the same data collections. This has many different user-friendly tools. It even has its own Jupyter lab. Just again, a use case example, this is Ypsilon. Ypsilon is crop monitoring, actually crop yield monitoring done at European scale with machine learning and biophysical crop models. So really, really computing heavy, big data, large algorithms, and this is run in the Open Telecom Cloud, so on the virtual machines of OTC that already have access to the Sentinel data collections. It includes atmospheric correction, cloud classification, land use, and then application of the planned biophysical models, all in one big cluster, and it outputs things like crop stress and crop yield for really large areas. And about the ecosystem, I mean, as I said, this is here to stay. So this little example is the LSTM satellite. What you see is a Sentinel-3 land surface temperature time series of the heat wave in Sicily. But the LSTM is an upcoming Copernicus mission for land surface temperature mapping. And we expect that the upcoming Copernicus missions are also going to be served inside the ecosystem. So public data providers will connect upstream to the data space as the Sentinel satellites did before, but we also hope that commercial data providers, actually they have already started to share their data inside the ecosystem to make it available to a large user group. And again, bridging the gap between public and commercial applications, a lot of downstream industry providers, a lot of downstream operational applications are joining the ecosystem and serving their data there. It's also ready for federation across data spaces. Things like the Open Science Cloud can be docked to the Copernicus Data Space Ecosystem. So we really hope to make the data easily accessible. Our usage statistics are rapidly growing. I hope they're also going to be growing by you guys. Because, as I said, I think that the data space ecosystem is a big transformative boost for the EO industry. This is a new era, a complete change, because it's taking away the large need for investment if you want to start working with EO data. Things like storage capacity or bandwidth are not really a limit anymore for working with EO data. And learning EO technology is becoming a series of incremental steps instead of a really steep learning curve. At least that's what we hope to show you. Thank you.